The Theosophical Society impacted many different people and led to the establishment of a lot of different groups. And one of the more interesting and unknown ones is that of Brother 12 and his Ark of Refuge colony. A former theosophist, he would break away and establish a settlement compound in Canada, try to install a puppet president in America, and ultimately disappear without a trace. The man who would become Brother 12 was born Edward Arthur Wilson in July of 1878 in England's greatest city, Birmingham. His parents were followers of Edward Irving, a charismatic preacher from Scotland who, like all charismatics, had predicted that the return of Christ would occur very soon, within the lifetime of his followers, and he generally preached a very apocalyptic message. Even as a child, Edward was prone to the mystic, saying that he had met with angels and supernatural beings. Once grown up, he would spend most of his young life at sea as a mariner. It was during those travels that he became familiar with theosophy, a movement that was attempting to synthesize science, theology, and philosophy into one unified worldview. Check out this video if you want to learn more about their beliefs and what happened to them. He married a woman from New Zealand in 1902, and after having 2 children and settling in British Columbia, he would abandon all 3 in 1912. By 1924, he had retired in the south of France at 46 years of age, and it was there that he first claimed to have supernatural visions. While lying in bed, an ankh, the Egyptian cross, appeared over him. In the following weeks, he would have other visions, until eventually he claimed to have an experience of what he described as looking through time and space, where a voice spoke out to him.
Thou who hast worn the double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt, of the high knowledge and the low, humble thyself. Prepare thy heart, for the mighty ones have need of thee. Thou shalt rebuild, thou shalt restore. Therefore prepare thy mind for that which shall illumine thee.
Now, as a theosophist, Edward already believed in both reincarnation and a set of masters who controlled the world and imparted secret, sacred knowledge to individuals at key times. He would say that those words revealed to him in that vision showed how in a past life he had been a pharaoh of Egypt, and now an ancient Egyptian master was contacting him to reclaim the power that he once held. Not only that, but he saw this master as the 12th member of the Great White Lodge, and would therefore change his name to Brother 12, both in their honor, as well as to distinguish himself as their disciple. He claimed that the angels he had thought to see as a child were actually these masters who had been present throughout his entire life. Now, one thing I didn't touch on in my theosophy video was this idea of a Great White Lodge, often called the Great White Brotherhood, not to be confused with the 11th century French militia or the modern-day gang. It doesn't really have anything to do with race and was basically just the council name given to the gathering of spiritual masters. Also, there are some conflicting reports in some of the stories when I was reading on whether Edward thought himself to be a literal reincarnation of a pharaoh, a reincarnation of the Egyptian god Horus, or whether he was more of a spiritual successor to those roles and not actually the same being. It seems like he may have told different followers different things, as we'll see later in the story. Anyway, back to Edward. After changing his name, he was given 2 tasks from the master, specifically to author 2 books. The first, entitled The 3 Truths, was on the 3 basic truths of theosophy: the unity of all life, the immortality of the soul, and the karmic laws. The second, entitled A Message from the Masters of Wisdom, warned of a coming destruction that would occur due to the world's ignorance of the 3 prior truths, with an excerpt from the book being, "The thoughts and inventions of men will be placed at the service of demons and will be used for the wholesale destruction of humanity. Those who perish will be more fortunate than those who remain." But he did give some hope, as Brother 12 had a plan for the future. He revealed that his special role was to construct an ark of refuge. There, people could be trained in the theosophical ways and ready the world for the new age of Aquarius. Keep in mind that although he uses the word ark, he means more of a compound or colony and not a literal boat. Outside of these two books, he often wrote articles for the Occult Review, a leading esoteric magazine. This would propel him into a relatively well-known and important figure in esoteric circles. He traveled to England in 1926 and would start to recruit followers to join this Ark of Refuge. Now, despite being pretty established in theosophy and occult groups, his ads in the paper only managed to attract a few people, and I suspect that this was due to the Ark's location. Not in England or even in Europe, but on the west coast in Canada, all the way out on Vancouver Island. Now, Vancouver Island, although it does look beautiful, also looks to be very inhospitable and uncomfortable, and I can only imagine how much worse it would have been to build a settlement there in the 1920s. Nevertheless, Edward was able to gather some supporters and made the journey out to Canada, convincing them that Europe was doomed to fall and they needed to seek refuge in the New World. He claimed this colony would be the center of spiritual energy and knowledge for the whole continent of North America, for the whole world in the not-distant future. But what were his beliefs? Well, originally as a follower of theosophy, he held a lot of general Neoplatonic views. He believed in reincarnation, karma, meditation, and of course the masters. But he did differ in beliefs in significant ways. At the time he was building his colony, the Theosophical Society was at its most prevalent, and the death of Helena Blavatsky had provided a golden opportunity for successors to come to power. The mainstream Theosophical Society was focused on interpreting and understanding Blavatsky's works, as well as preparing for the World Teacher. And although there were some members who claimed contact with the Masters, no one posited it as an exclusive revelation. Brother 12, on the other hand, positioned himself as the only one in contact with the Great White Brotherhood, and his word was second to no one. He claimed that the Theosophical Society had become misguided or corrupt, and he was truly carrying on their vision. And this attitude would be why he ruled over his colony with an iron fist, as opposed to the sense of equality and exploration that the mainstream Theosophical Society practiced. Another difference is that while both organizations believed in the coming of a new age, the Theosophical Society saw it as a good and peaceful thing that would benefit all people. Brother 12, on the other hand, likely due to his early life influence from charismatics, instead saw this as an apocalyptic event that would destroy civilization as we knew it, leaving only his colony as inheritors of the earth. And this sort of end-of-days rhetoric would allow him to get away with treating his colonists so poorly. Once in Canada, he would travel across the country, giving lectures at various Theosophical Society lodges, and he would set up the Aquarian Foundation, named for the coming age of Aquarius, and would start to gather members. He also met a man named Joseph Benner, an occult publisher who would help to increase awareness of Brother 12 and his efforts in the States. He went on recruitment drives all over California and San Francisco to raise money for the compound, setting up new chapters of the Aquarian Foundation and gathering more members to his cause. He even managed to convince relatively important people at the time, such as Will Comfort, a well-known writer, and Colson Turnbull, one of America's top astrologers, to join the board of the foundation, which would meet for the first time in July of 1927. Soon he had gathered enough money to purchase land outside of Nanmo in a town called Cedar, buying 200 acres 7 miles south and beginning construction of this colony. Although only a few dozen members lived there, he still had over 2,000 foundation members sending money from across North America. A true success story, taking only 3 years to go from an unknown to a leader of a colony on the edge of the world. Unfortunately for Brother 12, he began to fall into the same sort of issues that befall every cult leader. During his travels across Canada and California, he had a companion named Elma Wilson. Many regarded her as Brother Twelve's wife, although the two were never actually married. And the first trouble would start when Brother Twelve would gain a new mistress, a young follower named Myrtle Baumgartner. He had told Myrtle that she was the reincarnation of the Egyptian god Isis, and he was Osiris, meaning that only together could they give birth to the new Horus, who would help to save the world from impending destruction. That by itself wouldn't have been so bad to most followers if he wasn't engaging in physical relations with her in the House of Mystery, a building in the colony that had been built for spiritual contemplation and meditation. Of course, when questioned on this, Brother Twelve would remark that the union of him and Myrtle was a spiritual union, ordained by the masters, telling his followers, "You cannot judge of this matter as though it were an ordinary personal delinquency. It is nothing of the kind. It is not self-gratification. It is self-immolation on the part of those who would give of their bodies to be burned that we may bear witness to the truth." Not only that, but Brother Twelve also became involved in politics, specifically American presidential politics. Keep in mind that he was an Englishman living in Canada. He had started publishing a magazine known as The Chalice, but instead of an occult magazine like he had written for back in England, he was using this publication to try and influence the 1928 American presidential election. In this election, the candidates were the Democrat Alfred Smith, a Catholic, against the Republican Herbert Hoover. Now, Brother Twelve believed in a secret cabal that controlled both the world's economy and the actions of various nations, and he warned that the world was moving into a global dictatorship, where a few transnational corporations would concentrate power into a small oligarchy that would control the earth. Obviously, this concept seems incredibly far-fetched to us 100 years in the future, but he gave the quote, "Sleeping or walking, you are chained victim of this fearful thing, invisible control. No president is ever elected or king crowned, no treaty ever signed or army moved, unless it be at the bidding, or at least with the knowledge and consent of this unseen power, which controls prince and president and peasant alike." He planned to supplant this elite group in America by establishing a new Protestant third party, which would elect their own candidate to the presidency. He would start using his magazine to push an anti-Catholic, anti-capitalist, and anti-Jewish agenda to form this new Protestant party. He was so sure of this victory that he even declared, "I expect to select and will select the man who will be the next president of the United States." The candidate he selected was Alabama Senator James Heflin, who was already an outspoken critic of Hoover. Brother Twelve would travel to Washington and allied himself with various different Protestant groups, as well as the Ku Klux Klan, who were very anti-Catholic and therefore very critical of Smith. Keep in mind that in the 20s, being Catholic in politics in America was still seen very negatively, and Alfred Smith was the first ever Catholic nominated for the presidency. Now, obviously, Brother Twelve's plans didn't succeed. Herbert Hoover won, for which the Hoover Dam is named after, and although Brother Twelve did attend several third-party conventions, they failed spectacularly. This would also increase tension between him and his supporters, many of whom either disagreed with him politically or thought it was improper for a spiritual leader trying to influence politics to this degree. He did, however, accurately predict the stock market crash of 2029, which provided a lot of credibility to his supporters of his powers. Although those previous issues did cause some discomfort, everything might still have worked out if not for Brother Twelve's biggest issue: his authoritarian style of running both the colony and the Foundation. Now, despite establishing a board for the Aquarian Foundation, when construction of the colony began, he simply ordered plans as he pleased, not asking for approval or listening to reports from board members. Some high-ranking members quit over this, with the rest insisting that he dissolve the Foundation. Now, the reason people didn't just quit outright but wanted the Foundation dissolved was because a lot of them had donated properties and wanted those to be returned, and dissolving the Foundation would return those properties back to them. This caused Brother Twelve to begin stacking the board with his supporters, which in turn prompted a lawsuit with Brother Twelve accused of misappropriating thousands of Foundation dollars. He in turn accused the secretary of stealing around $3,000, who coincidentally disappeared before the case could be settled. Even though Brother Twelve was let off from the court due to a last-minute benefactor, this would put him on the radar of the provincial government of Canada. Bruce McKelvey, a journalist, learned of Brother Twelve from this court case, and after interviewing a few of the colony's members, he became dedicated to exposing Brother Twelve for what he saw as him taking advantage of easily fooled people. He started publishing articles in his paper, but even more so, he wrote to Harry Pooley, the Attorney General of British Columbia, and one of his personal friends. In his letters, he urged the government to become involved, describing the occultism and perversion that was occurring at the colony. And it wasn't long before the provincial cabinet was fully investigating the Foundation. At the same time, the Foundation became enthralled in another court case, this time for failing to pay back wages. Although this time there were some unorthodox events that occurred during the trial. The main witness, a former Foundation board member, collapsed soon after he started to testify. Then several members of the audience also collapsed. The judge was unable to speak and could only growl like a dog, and it was only after great effort that he was able to adjourn the court. When the case continued, the lawyer for the plaintiffs appeared to be dumbstruck and couldn't remember any of the proceedings. With both the main witness and the lawyer incapacitated, the court dismissed the case. But many suspected that Brother Twelve had used some dark arts or black magic to win. Not that it really mattered, as soon after, in November of 1929, the Aquarius Foundation was dissolved and all property was returned to its original owners. However, Brother Twelve was free to keep all of the money that had been raised, and it was a considerable amount of money. I couldn't find an exact estimate, but he is said to have converted most of the money into gold coins that he then stored away in jars. And with this money, he was able to maintain the colony and even expand. That same year, a new woman arrived, Mabel Scotel. She had arrived with her husband, but nevertheless, Brother Twelve immediately selected her as his new mistress, marrying her in an occult ceremony and changing both their names. His plans to rebirth Horus with Myrtle had not gone well. She had gone through 2 miscarriages and was suffering from an emotional breakdown. Eventually, she left the colony. Concerning Elma, Brother Twelve's first mistress, he sent her to Switzerland to set up a new Foundation chapter, although he likely only did this to get rid of her. And when she returned, he made it more than clear that he didn't want any sort of relationship with her, and she finally left the colony as well. After this, wealthy beneficiaries bought both De Courcy and Ruxton Island, donating them to the colony. Things were looking up, but Brother Twelve had underestimated his new mistress. Mabel renamed herself to Madame Z and began to rule over the colony, with Brother Twelve becoming increasingly more withdrawn. He had become paranoid that the Foundation was working against him, and started to distrust everyone except for Madame Z. Once she was in power, she started to increase the labor on the colony, working people in a brutal fashion and moving people from property to property with no rhyme or reason, seemingly only as an act of will. She even planted spies in the colony who would report to her of any treasonous thoughts. The authorities started to grow suspicious, and they began landing on the island under various pretenses to look around. Possibly fearing an invasion, Brother 12 started building encampments and camouflaged forts, wanting to defend against approaching boats. He started to train the group members in firearms, and they even started firing warning shots at boats that came too close to the island. The thought of trying to fight off the Canadian government was finally enough for the colonists, however, and they turned on Brother 12, starting to demand their money back and attempting to take him to court. He, for his part, knew that the Ark and the colony was at an end, and in June of 1932 fled the colony with Madame Z, destroying what structures they could and taking with them an estimated $400,000 in gold, an amount that would be worth over $70 million today. The colonists tried to sue for their money back, but by the time the case had started, Brother 12 had already escaped across Canada and back to England. A few years later, a secret compartment in a building on De Courcy was discovered. In it was a handwritten note written by Brother 12 saying, "For fools and traitors, nothing." After escaping, Brother 12 and Madame Z lived in Devonshire for about a year before traveling to Switzerland to meet with Dr. Roger Schmidt when Brother 12's health started to fade. Now, officially, on November the 7th, 1934, Brother 12 passed away. However, not many people who knew him believed this. The timing of his death was too convenient, ending the manhunt for almost $500,000. His death certificate was signed by Dr. Schmidt, but he had been his personal physician back in the colony, hardly an impartial physician. And there were reported sightings of him after his death, especially in San Francisco, where some say they saw him meeting with one of his old lawyers. In any case, after Brother 12's so-called death, the official trail goes cold, and both Madame Z and the gold were never seen again. But to this day, treasure hunters still go out to the colony and try to find a lost jar of gold coins. I hope you liked this video. I was really surprised that I hadn't seen much other content about Brother 12 or the Ark of Refuge, but I think it's a very interesting story. Let me know what you think, and thanks for watching. Later.